ManSchoolPodcast, Episode 2. Nate had some very interesting questions this episode. Hope you enjoy listening.
Okay.
All right.
Well, then let's start then.
All right. All right, it's on. Go.
Now. Now, Nate. Now.
Jeez, too much pressure.
Yeah, no pressure.
All right, so my first question.
No pressure.
Is gosh, too much pressure. I can't handle this. Okay.
Feel the love, Nate. Feel the love. No pressure. Feel the love.
In the midst of all the media and propaganda, how do I think for myself without getting influenced? How do I practice, or how do I obtain independent thinking?
I have an answer for this one, but I want you to go first. Just in case I'm overthinking it.
That's a tough question, though. That's a really complicated question or a really simple answer. It depends on how you want to look at it.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, it's very simple, in my opinion. I already have my own constructed views on how life should work and what's right and what's wrong. I do research to know the bias of a media outlet before I even listen to anything they say. As you're listening to people talk, you can usually discover their bias and know which way they're leaning. And then, here's what I always say about the truth. There's one person's side, there's another person's side, and then somewhere in the middle is the truth.
Not to be confused with the Hegelian dialectical. But we'll get into that later. Sorry. Mark's rolling his eyes. I apologize. Sorry.
So, if you can listen to let's just use politics as an example. If you listen to Fox News and then you listen to CNN, they're both going to go far on the same story. They're both going to find the far reaches of what they see as how it is. You read both articles, there's going to be some places that match up. That's the truth. The rest of it's all bull.
I would say it's close to the truth. Yeah.
That's the only way without actually being there that you can try to find the truth.
Yeah.
The only way. You have to take two biased parties who are reporting on the same, like I said, this is referring specifically to politics. You have to find two biased parties, read their articles, or listen to their article, or their conversation, mix it with the other opposing side. The portions that match up are the only portions you can take as true. Everything else is completely biased. Oh no, I'm not. I'm done with that. That's how.
My turn.
And if you want,
Sorry, no, I'm
I
asking.
actually wasn't done.
I'm
I was
asking.
wrong.
Yeah, go ahead. Go ahead.
The think for yourself portion, you already more than likely have your own views on how life works and what you think is right and wrong, right?
Yeah.
If you have mentors like you have here,
yeah.
and you see what we think is right and wrong, and you agree with those things, well, then you're already thinking for yourself. And if you see things that you don't agree with us on, and you see them and realize that they're there, you're already thinking for yourself. Just don't let anyone dominate your mind.
Ever.
Ever. You're free. You're an American.
How do I know if that's happened?
You'll know.
You'll know if you're not thinking like yourself.
Yeah. It won't sit right. You'll know.
It's really hard to explain how to realize that you're being played. That's
Some people are better at it than others. That's what defines a psychopath or a sociopath or the borderline somewhere in the middle. There's a spectrum that's a skill set that's very specific and very elusive. At the same time, it's really interesting. Very interesting to get into. But
it is a long, complicated thing to teach someone. to see.
It's all nuance.
And really, you have to... Honestly, it's one of those things that's really, really hard to actually teach. You have it or you don't.
So yeah, it can be cultivated.
It can be improved.
Right.
Like you said, it can be cultivated. But
yeah. And
there are some people who sadly just go through life and never once realize that anyone else might be controlling them.
Yeah, and they're
and there's no way to fix
what we refer to as on the spectrum, and then we leave it nice and vague about which spectrum. Yeah. My answer?
Your answer.
You can't. You can't listen to anything and not be influenced by it, because you bring it into your head, you consider it, and you either throw it out, and that's another experience, or you integrate it and implement it in some degree, some level, some form, some way. So you have to be very guarded about what you allow in to your thinking, not just your head and your ears, but your thinking. And when you listen to something critically, not just think critically, but listen critically, your brain puts a marker on it, and if you use it later, it sets off a little alarm in your head and goes, hey, is this something that we want to use right now? Is this the influence that we want to impart right now? Is this the thing that we want to have working right now? And if you're aware of it on the way in, you'll be aware of it in practice. But I have NPR and Sean Hannity's local channel on the buttons right next to each other on my car stereos, and I listen to both for about 15 seconds. Listen to a little Terry Gross, listen to a little Sean Hannity, or I don't know, the other guys, whoever, and then I shut it off and listen to pop music for a little while, or bluegrass, or a podcast that I have very intentionally chosen. The thing that makes me listen or not listen is the answer to the question, cui bono. Cui bono means who benefits. So it's from either Socrates or Plato. I have a theory about Plato not being a real person, but Socrates... Anyway, the student...
Okay, we're going to definitely have to go into that later. Maybe not on here, but I want to know what you just...
Okay.
We're going to have to talk about that.
This is actually a short answer. Okay, Robert Kiyosaki wrote Rich Dad, Poor Dad.
Uh-huh.
Do you actually think he knew two guys that were exactly like that, or do you think this is a little bit of a caricature? Right. To teach the lesson. He made it a parable, he made it an allegory, and set up this other literary voice in his lesson so that he could have a conversation with him. And I'm having a hard time remembering right now if it was Plato or Socrates that was the student, but we don't have any official writings from the teacher out of that pair. And the claim was that he was a teacher at a university, a place where you try to find unity in diversity, and that's where it came from, was the ancient thinkers, specifically the Latin and the Greek thinkers. They wrote down everything. They write down so much shit that things hid under rocks, and now we have a record after everything got burned down during one crusade or the other from whatever side. They put out prolific amounts of written down shit, except for this one guy who said, I don't write things down because that makes you forget them. And the only record that we have of that is his students saying, well, he never wrote anything down because he said, if you write things down, you forget them. Well, nobody ever met the guy except for his student, and we have these lessons from the Robert Kiyosaki type character at that time in that realm of thinking. And I really do think the teacher was not necessarily exactly how he was portrayed.
Okay. I have no arguments against any of that.
But I can't disprove it. And so that has to be enough of an answer for me. Other people can debate it all day long, or, hey, like Mark just did, I never thought of it like that. It's a little weird. Might even be a little uncomfortable. What the hell, Dan?
Influenced.
Yeah, see? But...
And I'm a strong-minded person.
He
but
really
he
is.
did not say anything that I can argue with. Nothing he said and to my knowledge is wrong. I can't argue any of it.
And I'm not requiring him to feel a certain way or validate my viewpoint. So we're good. Okay, cui bono. Who benefits? One of the argumentation or rhetorical devices that they used to come to a conclusion was cui bono. The modern interpretation that the FBI uses is follow the money. Cui bono is who benefits. I think I've already said that, but who benefits? So if a building burns down in a deserted corner of town, who benefits? Well, was it a random act? Because that would have some contextual clues, that would have some other things going on around it. Or was it somebody who maybe benefited from the insurance money? Ah, okay. Well, when you look at a political discussion, cui bono, Terry Gross wants ratings, Sean Hannity wants ratings, you know. So they'll talk about the same thing in a 2-hour cycle because they have a 4-hour show, and that applies to both of them. So they want to shock so that people have, NPR calls it driveway moments, and the other people call it listener retention. If their goal is for me to keep listening, and that doesn't benefit me, I don't care about their goals. Go feed on somebody else. But if a podcast is produced that just wants people to think, yes, no, maybe so, indifferent, totally one way or the other, then I am down with that motivation and I benefit. So I don't want to get too convoluted here. I've just applied cui bono to 2 separate areas. One, who should I listen to? Who benefits from my listening? Is it me or is it them? And then when somebody presents me with an idea, okay, if I believe that, who benefits from it? Well, if you're listening to a Democratic National Convention funded commercial, you know exactly who's going to benefit. Same thing with the Republican National Convention. You know exactly who's going to benefit. Okay. So, like Mark was saying, you look at what jives from both sides, and that's the stuff that you hang on to. I like to also hang on to the context just a little bit, because that shading usually pops up again and again and again. So when one side says, and I'm trying to think of an example from a police report because that is really good examples. One side says, a guy pulled into the driveway and started arguing with his ex-girlfriend in her new boyfriend's driveway, and he picked up a pistol from behind the dash and started shooting people and backed over one guy on the way out of the door and then sped away. And the other side says, the guy in the truck being the other side, I pulled into my ex-girlfriend's temporary residence to check on her because she had called me, and when I found the vehicle surrounded by friends of my ex-girlfriend's new boyfriend circling my truck, I loaded my gun retrieved my gun from the glove box and made ready in case I needed to defend myself. I retreated as quickly as I could, but in a panic there was a casualty. Okay, well, we know somebody got backed over, and one guy left out the fact that he shot at somebody, and we can prove that he shot at somebody because there's bullet holes in the house and in his windshield. Well, it wasn't from both sides, but you still have to consider it. So what actually happened? Your crazy ex sent you a text and said, please save me because we don't know. So we can't follow that trail any farther than this. And we can make some pretty solid assumptions. Crazy. Some people are just crazy makers. But you can't really put that in a police report just yet. We would need to interview her. So we know that the driver received a text. We know that he drove over there. Okay, that's mistake number 1. His vehicle was surrounded. Okay, mistake number 2, she didn't just hop in the truck and everybody left together, so apparently she wasn't in that big a hurry to leave, or she was being held hostage, or whatever, held against her will. And at that point, they should have called the cops. Okay, that was mistake number 2, but he still hasn't done anything that got anybody killed.
He could have driven off.
Right. If he was there long enough for someone to walk behind the truck, and this is an actual example from Marion, Illinois, from 2016?
I think it actually happened in 2015, but the case was just finally decided when our friend was
about 2 months ago, wasn't it?
Yeah.
Yeah. So you can make reasonable conclusions. You can't always claim that you've made a reasonable assumption.
The way the story ended was the man was guilty because he could have driven away the whole time. Mm-hmm. He chose to stay, and that's what made him shoot someone. Mm-hmm. The person who actually died wasn't the guy I got backed over. He was shot.
Oh, that's right. It was the guy in front of the truck. The guy behind the truck, broke his leg, and that was...
I don't know. He apparently had a machete.
Had some kind of hitting stick.
The guy inside the truck was in danger, but could have just driven away instead of shooting somebody.
Yeah, he's in a truck. If everybody in the house wanted to come after him, the house isn't going to fire up and chase him down the road. He had the upper hand in how this thing played out.
He could have driven away, called the police, went back.
Or not gone back.
Sent the police there.
Yeah, sent the police there.
That's going back instead of him.
Yeah.
The police.
Okay, sorry, my bad.
It was my point there. I probably didn't articulate it correctly. But he made the mistake of shooting the man.
Through his own windshield, which, that's not an insurance claim you want to make.
And then he ran away. On top of that. So
over the top of somebody else.
After he shot the guy, he drove off.
Over a machete. Duh.
And then left the truck somewhere, ran and hid.
Which proves so much.
That makes you guilty. That's going to make everyone assume you're guilty. And then when they find out that, hey, you could have just driven off instead of shooting someone.
And then backing over a machete to pop your tires so that you couldn't drive very far, so you had to put it in a ditch.
And the thing was, we all know a juror who was on this case.
Yeah.
And he's, after the fact, told us they were about to say not guilty. And then, then there was that.
The magic phrase here is preponderance of the evidence. And what that means, what that invokes, is you're considering not only the text that's presented. If you're reading a newspaper, that's the text. You're also considering the context of what's going on around where this story happened, when the story happened, who's involved, that stuff. And when you arrive at a decision under preponderance of the evidence, you've made a great, well-informed decision. And in the meantime, you have to be able to say, I don't know. Otherwise, your pride gets in your own way and you make bad decisions. I don't mean you specifically, but people make... I do. I've done it before, and I still have to fight myself to do it.
If you haven't made a bad decision based on pride, then you have none.
Good point.
Everyone's done it at least once or twice. Some of us considerably more.
Well,
Okay, so question 1.
Yeah, that was...
And most of question 3, I think we got there.
Question 3, yeah.
Okay.
So on to question 2.
It's question 2.
Question number 2. I think you guys will like this one. In today's world of celebrities and popular people, who do you admire the most?
Ooh.
And who do you dislike the most?
Batman! To both! No.
I need to hear that one. That was interesting.
Who do I admire the most?
I know admire, but I'm not. There's a lot that
That's
I hate.
alright if you don't
Oh,
answer
there's
one.
an answer.
Hmm.
He keeps in the front of his mind who he does like, not who he doesn't like. That's telling. I like that. That's a positive attitude.
Who do I admire the most? Joe Rogan. Why do I admire Joe Rogan? He's a free thinker.
Big time.
He will listen to anyone.
Anyone.
I mean, he had Ted Nugent on his podcast. He will listen and talk to anyone. But
The Nuge.
the thing is, I love his podcast because he takes his listeners on a journey of learning with him.
Yeah.
And he's an extremely smart man. He'll
He is.
pretend like he's not, but he is. And
He knows how to be a meathead. I'll give him that. He can be a meathead when he wants to be, but it served him well. I mean, he has a couple of, grand national titles in Taekwondo for, I don't know, half a decade or better.
I mean,
So,
he fought a lot until he was 19 and quit fighting. But he still trains, and he's a black belt, and I don't know. He's ridiculous.
jiu-jitsu.
He's an insanely inspiring man. And
Raging pothead.
which is a surprise, because you wouldn't
Yeah.
normally put inspiring with a pothead. But he's still
Yeah, and I'm not judging. I mean, it's just fascinating to me.
that he is what he is while being a pothead.
Yeah.
Um,
And funny.
His stand-up is
Love his stand-up.
hilarious.
Hilarious. Yeah.
Um,
The thing about asking the kid behind the counter at the dispensary how much, what was it, edibles? How high do the edibles get you? And the kid just made this horrible face, and he's like, that is not a unit measure! Wow, man, you're not just getting high, you're medicating. All right.
yeah.
I see where you're going with that.
But he likes he takes his followers and his listeners on an adventure and learning,
You might say a trip.
and he does it with as little bias as possible. He does lean to the left.
Sure, but he's honest about it, and he's upfront about it. I don't mean to interrupt, Mark. Sorry.
He is upfront about it. He's honest about it. In fact, he thinks he's more left than he actually is.
Yeah.
Like, he will say he is more left than he actually is.
Yeah.
Because if you listen to him and watch him, which I've watched 800 of his 1,100
Really?
podcasts, so I've spent a lot of hours listening to Joe Rogan. It's like I know the guy. I mean, you 3 hours of
Yeah,
pop.
he's pretty genuine, too.
Yeah, he's genuine in his podcasts. Just like we're trying to be as genuine as possible.
Yeah.
And you get to know him, and he's a very interesting individual. I admire him. I think he's you guys have probably heard me say the IDW, the intellectual dark web.
Mm-hmm. Oh, yeah.
He doesn't. He won't even admit it, but he's pretty much the one who put that together. Like, he didn't intentionally put it together.
He compiled
he
the list.
Pulled them together
Yeah.
by pulling them on his podcast, and then they all started talking more and more.
And that's where we're going to move forward as a society.
Like, if I could, this is what I would do. If I could just put a president in office and choose his cabinet for him, Joe Rogan as president, and then the rest of the IDW as his cabinet.
That works. I can see that. I can see how that would go.
Because Joe Rogan is the only one of them, all of them, who's just like, you know, tell me what you think. I'll take your advice. The rest of them are like, let's talk about this. But they're still going to hold on to their positions.
Yeah, they're usually pretty well thought out, though.
Oh, they're all brilliant people.
Yeah, they are.
They're
They
some of the smartest
really are.
people on earth.
Yeah.
The IDW, anyone who's listening to this podcast, look up the IDW.
Intellectual dark web. Fascinating stuff.
But
And then get tours. The Dot Onion is your friend, people. Okay, I'm done.
Joe Rogan is my favorite person. I really dislike. I can think of at least one person that I dislike. Maxine Waters.
She is goofy. Genuinely goofy, and I'm using that in the Canadian sense of the word.
I don't know what that means, but
The Frostbacks are so fucking polite. Goofy is fighting words.
Oh, wow.
Yeah. I was working up in Ontario, and one guy who grew up on the reservation and had come into town to make his money got into it with a French Canadian, and the French Canadian called this guy a goof, and I had to get between them, and it was not cool. Not cool. I was threatening paychecks and background checks and immigration checks, and one of them came up to my eyebrows, and the other one I came up to his armpit. And I was more afraid of the guy that was smaller than me than I was the guy that was bigger than me. And I thought, you know what? If this really does go south, I'm just going to walk out and let them settle it. And done. Wipe my hands of it. I'm going to let the playground handle this. But luckily the cops didn't have to show up or anything.
it's a really dirty question you just asked.
What?
There's a lot of people I admire and a lot of people I really dislike.
It's called a challenge. Challenge question. Makes you rack your brain a little.
Right. Okay. Who do I admire the most? Who do I admire the least? Well, if we're going off of just admiration, I would have to say the savage Jew, Ben Shapiro. With a close second being Abraham Hamilton III, not because of their political positions or leanings, but because of the way they make their argumentations. And I think they're both lawyers. Well, I know they're both lawyers. I think they were both prosecutors at one point.
Ben Shapiro never actually practiced law.
What? I am surprised by this.
He, well, actually, I'll take that back. He did do some pro bono stuff for Steven Crowder.
I thought he had courtroom experience.
No.
Not just
He
even
has
hallway lawyering.
You have to realize, I think Ben Shapiro went to college when he was 13.
Yeah, I know. So there's a giant gap in the space here.
Oh, he was a syndicated columnist by the time he was 17. Yeah.
That's fascinating.
He's been in politics since he was 17, heavily.
I didn't know that. Interesting guy.
But he went to Harvard Law.
Yeah.
So he learned how to argue
Really well.
the way they argue.
Yeah.
And that's why he goes on anything that they ask him to come on to and destroys whoever he's arguing with.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Thug life.
Yeah. Yeah.
Look up Ben Shapiro, Thug Life.
Yeah, you can pretty well hear a mic drop at the end of those videos. That's like Christopher Walken lion speech scene stuff. Pretty much every time he opens his mouth. Yeah.
Yeah, he is a lawyer. He's taught as a lawyer.
Yeah.
And he uses those skills in politics,
And does quite well.
which was very smart of him.
Mm-hmm.
I've never seen him lose a debate. Never.
Honestly, I haven't either. If you're just going on the merits of the argument, I've seen people lose their cool around him, and I've seen him get shouted down before to where he couldn't talk, but he never lost his composure. Yeah, he didn't lose it. He won that one.
He's sent them over the edge and then
that's-
just let them go.
That's what I admire about him. He knew that he was facing a crowd of weak people who had no fundamental core value in their own definition. They were on a bandwagon, and the thing that united that group was their want to protest him. So as long as he was there, they got to do what they wanted, but they didn't actually achieve anything. They didn't accomplish anything. They were ineffective in every sense of the word, except that he had to pause what he was doing. So that's who I admire the most.
Ben Shapiro's pretty high up there for me.
He is, yeah. In the current, yeah.
My top 3 are Joe Rogan, Jordan Peterson, Ben Shapiro.
There you go. There you go. Who I admire the least?
Nah, that's not what he asked. He asked who you dislike the most.
Oh, who I dislike the most?
I guess they kind of go hand in hand.
No, admire the least means you admire them, but less than the rest. Dislike is completely different. Who do you not like?
Yes.
That's why I said it was a dirty question.
Oh, I have a list, but I don't tell anybody because I want, deniability. If anything, I'm an American. I don't have to give you my list. Filth!
I probably shouldn't have mentioned Maxine Waters. Never mind.
Dude, she's on so many lists. You have plausible deniability. You're good, bro. You're good. Yeah.
I'm not saying though. Never mind.
Yeah, well, we're not inciting any action other than telling them to shut the fuck up, which is totally legal. And they can do the same to us, and we just go back and forth. Mazel, That's civil society. There's people standing in the streets screaming at each other, shut the fuck up, you're wrong, and never killing each other. And the difference between a civil society and an uncivil society is bloodshed over something stupid. I'll take an argument any day over bloodshed.
Doesn't mean we're not good at bloodletting.
We're good at both. We really are. But one's certainly preferable to the other. I would say that you and I would be more classic liberal. Yeah, libertarian. And it goes issue by issue.
But if you look at the way the political spectrum has been, it's been
flowing. Distorted. Okay, dude. There is a group, called the Third Option, started by Bill Clinton and I want to say Tony Blair, but that's not him. He was the PM at the same time that Bill Clinton was the president. They both got out of office roughly the same time. They paired up and they came up with a thing called the Third Option, or the Third Voice. And that's the Hegelian dialectical thing. Hegel said there is a thesis, an antithesis or antithesis, and then a synthesis. And if you want to manipulate somebody, you figure out where they are and where you want them, and you run backwards twice as far as you need to go and argue from that standpoint, and then until they will break down, then you meet them in the middle. And that's exactly where you wanted them. That's the use of the Hegelian dialectical. The ultimate flaw in the Hegelian dialectical right now, as it's being used, is it forces everyone to see everything in a bipolar, one option or the other, mutually exclusive, black and white, everything, definition of everything. Anything you look at right now, they want you to see it as yes or no, left or right, up or down, right or wrong. And that's a manipulation that just makes my skin crawl. Absolutely makes my skin crawl.
He's right. In every portion of what he just said, he's right.
Thank you.
Like I was saying, the political spectrum has been flowing. Conservatives and classic liberals are the same now. We're that center that he's talking about, that no one sees anymore, because the extreme right and the extreme left are too freaking loud.
And crazy. Genuinely crazy. We've been, as a society, we've been forced to accept crazy as a valid viewpoint. And I reject that. I absolutely reject that. That's... no. Because that makes things dangerous.
There's a left, the right, and the center.
Yeah.
And so everyone knows we pretty much do fall in the center.
Oh, yeah, totally. My favorite quote, and it actually came from Zach Galifianakis. He's a brilliant dude. People don't give him enough credit. He was... It was on...
and it actually came from Zach.
Hey.
It was the way you looked when you said that.
I'm intrigued.
Sorry.
I'm listening.
There's nothing liberal about shutting someone up. Mic drop. You cannot call yourself a liberal and tell someone to shut up. They have their rights too.
Socialist and communist.
Yeah, that's the fastest way to implement Marxism is with the Hegelian dialectical, and an emasculated population of liars is easy to control. Both of those are quotes. I don't know who from. That might be something fun to put in the forum points down below. The link. I'm pointing right now, but you can't see it because it's a podcast. Use your imagination. That's right. Go fans. Our fans are awesome. You have any comments today?
Oh, yeah, comments.
Yeah.
I'll start with you.
Me?
Yeah, you start.
Okay. There is something missing from... I was watching a Simon Sinek TED Talk earlier today, and this dawned on me. I remembered a story. There's a component missing from millennial and the Gen Z education, something that they haven't been shown yet. And that is, you do have to earn your place at the table. And it'll come back around to this, but that works both ways. So here's the story that I thought of. I had a really specific technical question. I'm a shooter. I do it for the physics. I do it for the math. I do it for the Zen moment. I'm a bench rest shooter. If anybody is into that or doesn't know what it is, look up Bench Rest Association of America. It's very high precision. Very, very high precision. That's not where I compete, but, you know, it's my interest. Shooting, marksmanship, Olympic level or better. And when a new round came out, the 300 Blackout, and I promise I won't get too far off in the weeds here, but the idea behind that round was that you could shoot it out of an AR-15 or whatever, and it's subsonic, and it was just kind of a cool solution to a couple of problems that weren't really problems, but they were pestering, and it was neat. But it was specifically for sound-suppressed firearms. And I went into the Outpost Armory, if I can use a specific reference here. I went into a particular gun store on the south side of Nashville, Tennessee. I was traveling for work, and there was this, you know, giant glowing thing in the distance. I'm like, I must go to there. So I did. And when you walk in, you're immediately in just an ocean, sales floor of accessories. And then off to one side is guns, in the middle is pistols, and around the wall is rifles. And the farther back that wing of the building you go, the more interesting the rifles. Now, the Outpost Armory is Ronnie Barrett's son's place, and Ronnie Barrett was the one that made heavy-hitting small arms much bigger. He designed the 50 cal shoulder rifle. Yeah, he's kind of a big deal. Barrett M108.
M108.
Yeah. Cool gun. Interesting thing. Ugly as sin. He's an absolute genius.
Wait. No.
I'm talking about
It's
a Modus barrel with a box hanging off the back of it.
It's so ugly that it's beautiful.
Yeah, it's all function. All function. But basically, he used jet science. He was a science rocketist and used rocket science literally to use the propulsion of the gun that's pushing the gun backwards, divert it so that it pulled the gun forward so that it didn't ram into your shoulder and literally break everything basically from your ribs to your jaw, and dislocate stuff so that one person could fire an anti-aircraft round one at a time out of a sniper rifle. And
it's pretty quick shooter too.
it is actually pretty cool. But his prototype was just dog ugly. It was so cool. They had one in the first Tremors movie. When he has a little bolt action, he pulls the buttstock out of the back of the gun and changes one. Okay, that's what I'm talking about. Anyway, he's a big deal. His son is taking over the business, and they started up this gun store in Murfreesboro, Tennessee, south of Nashville. And I go in, I go back to the rifles, and one of the guys is talking about this particular round of 300 blackout ammo. And these guys were handing it around, and it was maybe a compressed load. Compressed load means there's so much powder in it that it doesn't shake when you hold it up to your ear and shake it. The powder doesn't roll around, it's compressed in the casing. But it was a subsonic round, which is tough to do. Very interesting, but tough to do. You have to dial in the powder, and to make it consistent, that's a cool thing. That's a really cool solution to an interesting problem. And I listened in for a little bit, and I asked them, is it maybe a duplex round? Digging back, I love history and I love old technology. And around the turn, actually the military started using it in about the mid 1800s, War for the States kind of thing. The idea is, in a charge, there's the initial flash from a primer, or a primer cap, and then one powder burns, and that's going to burn at a particular speed, and then there's a flash paper that burns and lights another type of powder. So there's two types of powder in one round. Well, if you say to a reloader, are there two kinds of powder in that, the assumption is that they're mixed, and you never do that. It's a terrible idea. It's too many variables. You're going to blow up your gun and kill everybody on the range, and it's a terrible, terrible, terrible idea. Everybody freaks out. Well, I said, is this maybe a duplex round, or does it maybe have a retardant in it like borax or, halon or something, whatever. And everybody freaked out. Oh my God, you can't mix two powders. Oh my God, you can't mix two powders. You can't mix two powders. I'm like, whoa, 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 whoa. That's not what I'm talking about. And nobody wanted to listen. None of the young guys wanted to listen. Well, the third spoke on that wheel is reloaders. So you walk in, there's the accessories. Off to the left is the rifles. And then off to the right is reloading. And one of the old guys back there leaned in. He didn't say anything. He didn't make a big deal. He just leaned in and kind of locked in on me. And I'm looking around like, okay, are they going to run me out of here? Finally, the oldest guy at the rifle counter said, maybe you need to talk to Doc. Doc. Okay, that's telling. I said, who is Doc? And he said, he's over there. And pointed to the reloading section. And I thought, okay, he's running me off, but whatever. He said, ask him about it. I said, okay. So I go over and I say, are you Doc? And he says, I am. And he's been looking at me the whole time. But it wasn't creepy. Like, I was on his radar. You know what I mean? Everybody at the rifle counter, the conversation moved on. They're handing this ammo around. And they forgot about me. There's a lesson in that. As soon as I walked away, the people that were, I would have been embarrassed about saying what I had said, they forgot about me as soon as I walked off. But one guy noticed it and sent me to another room, basically. I get up to Doc, and he says, you want to know about reloading? I said, yeah, I know a little bit, but it's kind of a specific thing, and I don't think they know what I'm talking about. And he said, so do you do reloading? And I said, I have. The whole time I grew up, my dad reloaded, and, he shot competition pistols, so we always did that, and I'm in it for the physics and stuff. And he kind of sat back in his seat and shook his head. He's like, all right. He said, you ever do any shotgun reloading? And I thought, okay, well, I'm not going to get my answer. I said, yeah, a little bit. He said, how much do you know? And I said, again, I'm into the physics, but I'm not a shotgun shooter. He said, do you know the bore diameter of a 12 gauge? It was a weird question. It was kind of out of left field. And I said, well, the wads are 73 caliber, 0.73 inches, but the bore diameter of their actual chamber in a non-modified with no choke is 0.75 inches, so 75 caliber. And he said, good. Now wait a minute. If you just ask somebody a question, do you know the answer to this? And there's nothing behind it. If they give you the right answer, you go, cool. But if you're asking somebody a question with a purpose, you check their answer and rate it, good or bad. And he said, okay, good. What about a 20 gauge? And I said, 68 caliber. He said, okay. What about a 28 gauge? And I gave him the right one. And he said, okay, what about a 410? And I said, 410, .410, which is actually the 45 long Colt is a 41, but if there's a choke, you can shoot a pistol round out of it. And he crossed his arms and nodded, and he said, okay. And he went back in the back room and came out with a book with loading data from the late 1800s and pulled me down to the end of the counter where nobody could hear us, and he explained to me how a duplex round would work in what they were talking about on the other end of the building. What the fuck? I mean, I had to answer 3 questions to get across the bridge. I had to get to the... And that's exactly what it was. I got invited into the next room, and then I got the chance to prove myself and show him that I was wanting to learn, that I was there to learn. I wasn't being a know-it-all, but that I had a legit question. And it was so specific that it was you're way down the rabbit hole at that point. Way down the rabbit hole at that point. And he recognized that, and he saw somebody that would respect what he had to bring to the table. And then I got to, metaphorically, sit at the table with him. We sat at a gun counter, between a Dillon press and an RCBS, and he explained to me how it would work. And he said, with a necked round, that would be difficult because the flash paper might not go. And by the time I walked out of there, he and I had an idea of how to make it happen, but it was basically a tracer round, and neither one of us wanted to play with that because then your projectile loses weight as it gets farther away from you, and that's stupid. So that's probably not what's going on with the little, 23-year-olds at the other end of the counter who were ogling this new toy that they just got in to play with and trying to figure out how it works. The lesson there is I had to earn my place in the room. I had to earn my place at the table, and I don't think most millennials would realize that they were being questioned not because they weren't good enough. They would take it as an insult when in fact it was just, do you have the ability and the desire to sit at this table and have this conversation? And because millennials don't know that lesson, they don't apply it to their own table. So they'll have a conversation with any schmuck that wants to engage. And if you don't believe me, get on Facebook. That is 99% schmucks, and they all yell so loud that the intelligent people just leave. So you're in an echo chamber full of jackasses at that point. But I really wish millennials would learn as a group they have the right to not speak to certain people, and so does everybody else. And just because somebody's questioning you doesn't mean that you're being judged. And I know that's a little ethereal, but I think it's very important because it opens a lot of doors. Okay. That was probably 20 minutes, and I apologize for that, but...
We're good.
We're good.
Okay.
I have nothing to add.
What?
I really have nothing to add today.
You're supposed to yield your time before I speak, man. That makes me look like less of a jackass.
That really has nothing to do
Thank
with
you, Captain Windbag. Now over to you, Mark. No, we're good.
Nothing to do with it. I really can't think of anything to add.
Oh, okay. Thank you.
I'm gonna put like right before you start. I'm gonna be like, all right, ladies and gentlemen, welcome to the Nerd Corner, where we have Daniel
Oh, yeah, the science corner.
Mm-hmm.
We totally need that.
And that concludes this week's episode of ManSchoolPodcast. Thank you guys for sitting with us, and be sure to give us constructive feedback or a question of your own at ManSchoolPodcast@gmail.com. That's ManSchoolPodcast@gmail.com, all lowercase. Thanks again, and always think for yourself.